One company invented the machine you are looking at right now. Not the brand on it, the idea of it. The screen with windows you can open and close. The little arrow you push around with a mouse. The network that carries this video to you. The printer in the next room. All of it was born inside a single laboratory, built by one corporation more than 50 years ago. That company was not Apple. It was not Microsoft. It was not Google. It was a photocopier company from Rochester, New York, called Xerox. Xerox held the entire future of computing in its hands, fully built and working, a decade before anyone else. And then it watched other people get rich from it, while it went back to selling copiers until the day it stood on the edge of bankruptcy, nearly destroyed by the very machine that had made it a giant. This is the story of the empire that invented the modern world and could not bring itself to sell it. To understand how much Xerox threw away, you first have to see how it was born, because it began as one of the great underdog stories in business. It started in 1906 in Rochester, New York, as a small firm called the Haloid Company that made photographic paper. For decades, it was nothing special, a modest business fighting to survive against giants like Kodak. Its salvation came from a stranger. In 1938, a quiet patent clerk named Chester Carlson, working alone in a rented room above a bar in Queens, New York, made a smudged image on a little glass slide. He wrote 3 lines on it: 10, 22, 38, Astoria. It was the first photocopy ever made. Carlson had invented a way to copy any document in seconds on ordinary paper, using nothing but static electricity and powder. He was certain it would change the world. The world did not agree. He took his invention to more than 20 companies, including some of the biggest names in America, and every one of them turned him down. They could not imagine why anyone would need it. Finally, tiny Haloid took the gamble that everyone else refused. It poured almost everything it had into turning Carlson's strange idea into a product. And in 1959, 21 years after that image in Astoria, it unveiled a machine that would rewrite the company's future. The machine was called the Xerox 914, and it was a sensation. It was a monster of a thing, weighing more than 600 pounds, but it could copy a document at the push of a button, fast, on plain paper, something no office machine had ever done. It was so novel that Xerox did not even sell most of them. It rented them out and charged by the copy, and customers made so many copies that the money never stopped. When it launched, experts guessed the company might place 5,000 of them in 3 years. By the end of 1962, 10,000 had shipped, and the factory could not keep up with the orders. The 914 did not just sell, it created an entirely new habit for the entire working world. Offices that had once retyped documents by hand now made copies by the millions. The company changed its name to Xerox, and its stock became one of the hottest on Wall Street. And then something rare happened. The name became a verb. People no longer made a copy. They Xeroxed it. That is how completely this company owned its world. By the late 1960s, as Chester Carlson quietly gave away most of his $100 million fortune, Xerox revenues were approaching $1 billion a year. It held a near monopoly on the way the modern office worked. Cash poured in from every copier, humming in every building in America. Xerox was rich, dominant, and utterly certain of what it was. It was a copier company. And that certainty, the very thing that had made it great, was about to become the trap that nearly killed it. In 1970, riding on copier money, Xerox did something visionary. It opened a research center 3,000 miles from its headquarters in Palo Alto, California, and called it PARC. Then it did the smartest thing a company can do. It hired some of the most brilliant computer scientists on Earth, handed them money, and let them chase the future. What they built in the next few years is almost unbelievable. In 1973, the PARC team finished a machine called the Alto. It was the first true personal computer, and it had everything. A screen that showed you black text on a white page, exactly as it would print. Overlapping windows you could move around. A small pointing device called a mouse. They invented Ethernet, the technology that still connects computers in offices today. They built the laser printer, which could put anything on a screen onto paper with perfect quality. They created Smalltalk, one of the first modern programming languages. Sitting in that lab in 1973 was a working vision of the world we now live in. The personal computer, the graphical screen, the mouse, the network, the laser printer, all of it, running, complete, years before the rest of the world had a clue. Xerox had not just glimpsed the future, it had built it, and it was sitting on a desk in California. The only thing left to do was sell it. And that is where the story turns dark. The problem was not the scientists in California. The problem was 3,000 miles away, in the boardrooms of the East Coast, where the men who ran Xerox looked at this miracle and simply could not see it. To them, Xerox was a copier company. It made machines that put ink on paper and charged customers for every copy. That was the business. That was the whole world. And a personal computer did not fit anywhere inside that world. It was not a copier. It did not make copies. Executives who had built their entire careers on the humming rhythm of the copier looked at a computer with a mouse and saw a curiosity, an expensive toy for engineers, a science project that would never make real money. They were, quite literally, the wrong people looking at the right thing. When Xerox finally did try to sell PARC's work, it got it almost completely wrong. In 1981, it released a computer called the Star, built on everything PARC had invented. But it priced a single workstation at around $16,000, and a full office setup could cost over $50,000. It was slow, it was closed, and it was aimed at the same corporate customers who bought copiers. It sold only about 25,000 units in total. The future had been in their hands, and they had wrapped it in the logic of the past and watched it fail. While Xerox hesitated, someone else walked right through the open door. In December of 1979, a young Steve Jobs led a group from a small company called Apple into PARC. He was not there by accident. Earlier that year, Xerox had agreed to invest about $1 million in Apple before it went public, and in exchange, Apple was allowed to see what PARC had built. So the scientists gave Jobs a demonstration. They showed him the screen, the windows, the mouse, a computer you could actually point at and understand. Jobs stood there, according to the engineer running the demo, waving his arms and shouting, "Why hasn't this company brought this to market? What is going on here? I don't get it." He understood in a matter of minutes what the men running Xerox had failed to understand in years. He walked out of that building, and he took the idea with him, and he built it into the Apple Lisa, and then the Macintosh. Microsoft followed with Windows. The graphical screen, the mouse, the desktop, all of it spread across the entire planet and made other companies some of the most valuable businesses in history. Every one of them was built on the foundation Xerox had laid and then abandoned. Xerox had handed the future to the very people who would use it to change the world and kept for itself only the copiers. And here is the cruel part. While Xerox was giving away the future, its actual present, the copier business, was quietly falling apart too. For years, Xerox had held a near monopoly, but in the mid-1970s, under antitrust pressure, it was forced to license its copier patents to competitors. That opened the floodgates. Japanese companies, led by Canon, came in from below with smaller, cheaper machines that broke down less often, and they climbed steadily upward. Xerox's share of the plain paper copier market collapsed from about 85% in 1974 to just 40% by 1985. The giant was being eaten alive at both ends, giving away computing on one side and losing copiers on the other. It made things worse with its own mistakes, like buying a computer company for nearly $1 billion, only to shut it down a few years later. And then, at the turn of the century, it all came due. Sales stalled, quarters were missed, and the stock, once one of the hottest on Wall Street, went into freefall. By 2001, Xerox was carrying more than $17 billion in debt. It had lost money for 6 straight years, and it stood on the very edge of bankruptcy. The company that had invented the personal computer was now weeks away from filing for Chapter 11, brought down not by a lack of ideas, but by the slow erosion of the one product it had always understood. Then came the final humiliation. Regulators found that the company had been manipulating its accounts to make its numbers look better than they were. In 2002, Xerox paid a record $10 million penalty, and was forced to restate years of earnings. The company that had invented the future was now fighting just to survive. The tragedy of Xerox is not that it was blind, it is that it could see perfectly and still could not act. And there is one invention that proves it, sitting right in the middle of the story. Remember the laser printer, born in that same PARC lab, alongside the computer and the mouse. Xerox actually did commercialize that one. It turned the laser printer into a line of products that earned the company billions of dollars, so much money that this single invention paid back the entire cost of running PARC many times over. Think about what that means. Xerox was not incapable of turning PARC's genius into gold. It did it spectacularly, with the one invention that looked enough like its old business, a machine that put marks on paper. The laser printer was close enough to a copier that the copier men could understand it, so they sold it and got rich. The personal computer was too strange, too far from ink and paper, so they let it walk out the door with a young man from Apple. Same lab, same scientists, same era. The only difference was whether the invention fit the stories Xerox already told about itself. One did, and it made a fortune. The others did not, and they made everyone else's fortune instead. So what is the real lesson buried in the wreckage of Xerox? It is not that the company was stupid. It employed some of the smartest people who have ever lived, and it paid to invent the future on purpose. The lesson is quieter and far more dangerous than stupidity. Xerox died a little, not because it could not build the future, but because it could not recognize anything that did not look like its past. It was so completely defined by one wildly successful product, the copier, that when its own scientists placed a working miracle on the table, the leadership could only measure it against the thing they already understood. If it made copies, it was real. If it did not, it was a toy. That is the trap that waits for every dominant company. Every empire that has won so completely that it forgets winning was ever a question. Success does not just make you rich. It tells you a story about who you are, and that story becomes a cage. Xerox could not escape being a copier company, even when it was holding the entire future of technology in its hands. It survived, in the end, smaller and humbled, still making printers and machines. But the world it invented belongs to other names now, names it handed the blueprints to and watched walk away. Xerox is just one empire that stood at the very top of the world, holding the future in its hands and could not bring itself to grasp it. There are many more, giants that were once so certain of who they were that they could not see what they were becoming, right up until the moment they fell. If you want to know which empire was toppled next and exactly how it happened, subscribe, and we will tell you the story of the next one to fall.